everybody, it's Steve Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion on the subject of decentering. And this is something we started talking about last time around. A person who's in the DEI space brought this idea forward. And basically what we talked about last time around is that when he's using the words or the concept of centering, he's talking about something very different than what we mean when we talk about finding the center of the change grid, etc. And so in a nutshell, he was just saying that everyone operates from their own center, their own core. Now, that center may be very different than somebody else's center because it's built out of your beliefs and your values and your attitudes and your thoughts and your superstitions and your biases, and all that goes together. You end up over time creating for yourself this situation that you would say is you being centered. You know, this is you, this is the core you, the essential you. But we believe that the essential you could be very different than what we're talking about when someone is at the center of the change grid. And I'm trying to find that little diagram that we used. Chris, I don't know if you have it handy, but why don't you tell people a little bit about what grabbed your eye about that centering thing while I find that diagram to send to everybody again.
Yeah, I just thought the concept was interesting based on how we see the benefits of being centered and his thought process on being decentered. I've never really heard the term before, but from the DEI perspective, he was talking about for me, he was saying about leaving there just so that you can create more inclusive relationships, and by being in the center, it can get in the way of creating those types of inclusive relationships that you want to establish.
Yep. And the only distinction we made beyond that was that we wanted to refer to an individual's center as their center, as opposed to the center. And ultimately, Chris, did you get to watch the whole recording? Did you get to look at it?
Yes, from beginning to end. And check your cell phone, because I texted over to you, so the picture's in your phone.
Oh, you did. Yeah, just 1 second. Then let me get over here to my messages. La da 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 da. Chat amongst yourselves. La da 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 da. Anywho, he tell us about who this guy is again. He's Chan, I think is his last name. Do you know anything about him?
No, I enjoyed Friday when you talked about the research that you did into him. Like, you didn't find any additional work, but I believe he and on LinkedIn he's a leader in the DEI space.
All right, then. What does one have to do to become a leader on LinkedIn in the DEI space?
Update your profile.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, is that like some big you apply for the position, like being a group moderator, or do you just kind of earn it over participation time, things like that?
Yeah, I just say that in jest. I don't know his background. It appears that he spent significant time in that space around inclusion. So people that I've seen other people comment on his work and post his work. So he seems to be a trusted voice to many.
Yeah, I think so too. I couldn't find anything about him. I just chatted something over to everyone. I don't know if you could open that file. It's this HEIC format that I don't know if that's just a Mac thing. But otherwise I can send over another version of it. I also exported it as a PDF. So thoughts? Are you able to open that file? Anybody? Kathy in particular?
I'm getting a security message.
Well, I paid for a converter file.
I can't get it either.
I paid $1.
Then I just sent everybody a PDF file.
Yeah, I paid $1.99 for a converter file, so I'm able to
did
open
you?
it.
Yeah, HEIC is some format that an iPhone uses, and I always have to switch things over to a JPEG or something, or it's faster to do it as a PDF. Nevertheless, hopefully you are seeing the diagram on the screen. Let me slide this in.
It's very nice.
Yeah, good, good, good. All right, so Arthur Chan, and he basically says that these are the things that you would want to do to get yourself off of your center, so that you can become more inclusive in your mindset. And we spent a lot of time on the last call doing this, but we say, if you're saying that what I need to do to decenter myself, become more inclusive, is I need to listen more, I need to suspend my judgment. Well, that implies that there is somebody out there who doesn't listen and judges quite a bit. And we ask the question, where on the change grid would someone be who doesn't listen and judges all the time? And what we ended up coming up with is that they're definitely outgrid somewhere. And, we talked about whether they could be in the danger zone or right on the line or wherever they happen to be. But we just said, overall, the further outgrid you move, the more likely you are to speak rather than listen, and to judge rather than not judge. And so, bottom line, we said, well, the remedy to that, honestly, is to move yourself to the center of the change grid. So if instead of living at your center, you instead said, no, I want to live at the center. At the center, you would listen to understand. You would practice silence and reflect before you respond or react. You would create space. So you can literally detach yourself physically from what's going on. The only ones, I think, you would ask open-ended questions. You would not derail or steer the conversation, because you're going to be more open, etc. So all this stuff is actually happening, or the remedy for these issues, or the outcome of doing these things, would put you in the center of the change grid. The only one that seemed unusual was sitting in discomfort. And so, again, I tried to find some sort of deeper dive understanding into what Chan means by this. I suppose I could send the guy a question, but nevertheless. But from what we were able to infer from it, if you step out of your comfort zone, you're more likely to become inclusive. You have the opportunity, at least, to become more inclusive, because you're being exposed to a new situation, uncomfortable though it may be, where you're going to meet new people, have new experiences, new understandings, new whatever. And so we want to be on a quest for discomfort, because the growth that comes from moving into discomfort is where ultimately we grow. We redefine what comfortable is for us, and the new definition is far more inclusive than the one before was. So that's kind of like the essence of what we went through last time around. Any questions, comments? Anyone want to throw anything in? Hey, Brian. Hey, Edie. Hey, Linda.
I think the more that I think about this is, I think about the neuroscience, people call it somatic surfing.
Yeah.
So somatic surfing, you're seeking some sort of self-regulation. So you do that through a continuum of how you're feeling, how you're taking in the environment, these kinds of things. And what tends to happen is, as I think about his perspective here, you create the opportunity for synaptic pruning. So like you're cutting ties with these strong patterns of behavior, so that you can adopt new ones that are more effective for whatever it is that you're trying to experience.
All right.
And so you do that over time. It's not a one hit, one size fits all thing. Everyone has a different capacity to do that, different thresholds to do it. It takes some experimentation.
That speaks to life inside of the green circle, as opposed to life between the green and the red. I do think that people that are, inside this green circle, well balanced, harmonious, things are pretty peaceful, practical, lots of good stuff happens inside this green circle. But I think one of the things that naturally comes in here, perhaps it's because we become observers of everything going on around us. Maybe that alone is helping us to expand our thoughts and become, as Chan would say, more inclusive in our mindset and ultimately in our behavior.
Right, but there has to be a symbiotic relationship between, the person that is observing it and what is being observed. And that's where regulating biases and these kinds of things, so that it doesn't hinder the opportunity to learn, right?
Yes, yes,
because
yes.
otherwise you're looking through, a faulty lens, so to speak, because it's only going to be one perspective. Because remember, the body's always looking for a homeostatic kind of balance in
Yeah.
all things that we do. And so when we move or when we're exposed to new uh, dynamics, then that opens the door. Automatically, we're going to start questioning our own perspective, our own questions. So all this interoceptive kinds of
Yes,
things are
yeah.
questioned.
Play. Well, let's Tim's on the call. Oh, let's throw him in the spotlight for a second. Oh, Tim, do you know who this Arthur Chan gentleman is, or have you heard about this concept of decentering?
No, in fact, I listened to the last session you all had on this. I am not familiar with him, no.
Had you heard that little phrase where he said, like, diversity is reality? Um, and then he talks about inclusion is the goal. He's got this little phrase he's known for. I should have just pulled it all up and give it to you guys again. But yeah, anyway, apparently not.
Yeah, yeah. He touched on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Ah, yes,
And
right.
yes. And so, you know, I get where he's coming from with it. I think what he's attempting to do here, where he uses this term decentering yourself,
Mhm.
is talking about being able to experience the environment from someone else's perspective, the walk in someone else's shoes kind of thing.
Sure.
Particularly when he talks about being getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. I think he frames it as you see there, sit in discomfort. We talk a lot about that in the work where we try and encourage folks to do things that they're not comfortable with, engage with people who are not like you,
Yes.
so that you can get a different perspective about what things look like in the environment and what other individuals are experiencing in the environment. As so that you move away from making assumptions that everyone sees the world as you do. One of the things I thought about in a prior call, Brian quoted, I always have trouble pronouncing her name, but Brian, it will probably come to you when I quote her, where she talks about, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Right.
And so when you think about that, certainly I think about it when I look at his work, Mr. Chan's work, and what he's encouraging people to do to try and come outside of the green circle where their comfort level lies.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, and he's Nin. Yep.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. In fact, I first learned of Nin's work through a greeting card I received from somebody. So someone took all of her quotes and turned them into, a hallmark moment. And this one started like in the middle of a thought in one of her quotes. It just says, and it shows a lotus blossom on the front of it. And it says, little excerpt says, and then the day came where the pain of blossoming became less than the pain of staying um, in a bud or something like that. And I thought, isn't that an interesting kind of way to look at it? People are, as they create the center for themselves, what they're trying to do is stay locked into this one definition of themselves, this one persona, when in truth, if they would just let go of the pain that is holding them so tight in this persona, maybe they would find wonderful new things and grow in great ways, etc. So yeah.
There's a really powerful scene. You remember the television show Little House on the Prairie?
Oh yeah.
And I believe, was it Michael Landon that was in
Michael
that show?
Landon. Yep, he was
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So there's this scene with he and Todd Bridges. Um, and Todd had gotten in trouble in school because of something he said about his experience as a young Black boy. And when Michael came to the room to talk with him about that, they had conversation about it. And in the end, as Michael is about to leave the room, Todd asked him, "Can I ask you a question?" And he stops and looks at him. And Todd says, "Would you want to be Black?"
Mm.
And the scene just sort of ends there. Of course, Todd's character, I don't think used the word black. I think he used the N word.
Mhm.
But it was that moment that gave Michael's character a pause, as he, and that's really what Arthur Chan is talking about here in this diagram, of trying to get people to look at the world through someone else's lens.
Yeah, and so I think it really is interesting to kind of look at his concept, this idea about centering him, getting out of your center to accomplish things Tim's talking about. For me, the question then became, well, and I guess this is where I wanted to move things in the conversation today is, what happens when you're in a world where everybody has their own definition of center? And they're all out there operating in the world from this place they consider to be this center, the essence of themselves. And why do we think we're right? Maybe they're right. So any thoughts anyone like to share about, is there a dysfunctional set of centers and a more functional set of centers, and then an ideal center? What do you guys think?
That's a great question to ponder, especially in today's time, as you look at the extremist kind of behaviors where there doesn't seem to be a balance to even consider anymore, right? When it comes to communal and congenial kinds of ways of interacting with each other. So I think we're in that state where there's dysfunctional kinds of centers. I'm right, you're wrong. That
Right.
never wins anything, right?
But is that really centering, Brian? I don't think
That's what I'm saying. It's centering in that it's coming. It's a starting point or a balance. That's where the human body always starts from, some threshold, some balance point, or
I
set point.
see centering as being connected to spirit,
Yeah.
as being connected to your heart in its highest form. And so there is a basic definition for what that means. I think when you are off, anytime you're off center, it's dysfunctional. And
I
so
would agree with that. I definitely.
I'm not saying it is dysfunctional, it's potentially dysfunctional,
Yeah.
which is why people are, so that's, but that's, that's a spiritual approach to centering.
Well, but again, I think that's why I wanted to make the distinction between center as we define it, which aligns with what Kathy has just shared, with someone having their center. So their center might feel like the true essential reality, the perfect kind of thing, but they're living in a very different definition of center than we see as that center.
So
But
it's
is
more.
that
Yeah, go ahead, Edie. Edie, go ahead.
But is that centered, or is that just their
It's
norm?
centered for them.
Yeah,
Right,
I
right.
think it's more their norm then, isn't it?
It's their norm,
As-
but for them, they would say, hey, this is when I'm this way, whatever this way means, I feel like me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mhm.
feel authentic. I feel whatever. So for them, as distorted as others may evaluate their center, they think they're centered and they're operating from that center.
Right. And so then that becomes this, anything outside of that becomes a threat, or certainly this other, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
like the way that Kathy,
destabilizing.
right,
Yeah,
is that.
destabilizing.
And so what Kathy has described is the bigger picture, right? And so when you operate from that, there's a different perspective. We've been talking about this in health design thinking, moving from this idea of human centered to humanity centered. Because they say human centered is what you just described, is when everyone have, their version of human centered. But when you talk about humanity centered, now we're saying what's best for the planet, what's best for the environment, what's best for all of that. That's a different centering perspective.
Well, right, but I would suggest that there are people out there who can't even begin to make any mental room whatsoever for center as you've just described it.
Absolutely. That's
But
why we're in the problems that we have.
they're
because
so
there's
locked in to whatever
and
it is their
I,
definition.
I think this dialogue is the essence of diversity, right?
mhm,
And the breadth and depth of the diversity conversation, because what we're really describing is the conflicting values, and what my socialization, my environment, my education, my experience in life and in this world uh, shapes my perception of reality, and which leads to my values and beliefs. And so those could be, completely opposite of someone else's who has had a different life experience, but yet we both believe that, what we see is the reality. And so that becomes my centeredness, and it can be in conflict with someone else's. And that's why we wind up with the difficulties that we have, is because the question then becomes, well, what guides that centeredness?
Yeah.
What should we all lean on? If we're talking corporately, then we all lean on the values of the corporation and what it describes it believes in and what its policies are. And those policies guide our behavior, right? But
right.
outside of that, when we're in the world, I mean, what is that one thing that everyone leans on that says, in spite of the fact that I have had a different experience or I perceive things to be differently, this one thing
Yep.
will center us?
Right. And that gets back to
Mhm.
our discussions about finding common ground,
Mhm.
etc. I don't know why my diagram is visually so off, but um, this I think is, oh, that says it's centered. Um, you guys are talking about these different centers and like some could be more problematic than others. And so what I just wanted to do is throw this diagram up. I've taken the different roles we've talked about, so leader, all the way around thinker, advocator, and just overlaid our circles. And so I believe if you want to look at someone who has a leadership energy to begin with, and even if you say at their center, their idea of center, they view themselves as being this leader or whatever it may be. There's a difference between a leader who is centered out here, outside of the red circle, a leader who believes they're centered and they're between the green and the red circle, and a leader whose center is still inside the green, but not at that perfect spiritual, evolved kind of place that we talk about. So
Mhm.
so I guess my thought is that depending on who it is we're talking to, they're always going to be telling us what their center is, unless they are aware enough to do what Chan is talking about, or what Tim was referring to. Can you step out of yourself? Otherwise, we have to learn how to deal with each of these, what do I say, off-center centers.
Can we place this? Can we place this in a different kind of context for a moment and talk about ego?
Yeah, by all means, by all means.
Because as you're talking to you, and I look at this fellow Chan's definition, um, being able to step outside of one's center means letting go of your ego in the human sense. I mean, everyone has an ego, but in the human sense of ego meaning about me or whatever, and what we're saying is the center here, or these efforts are about, and I wouldn't call it decentering steps. I call these 6 steps to center yourself, but it's about to recenter yourself. But I think it's about letting go of ego. So sitting in discomfort is about letting go of ego. It's about practicing silence, letting go of ego, creating space, letting go of ego, asking open-ended and leading, letting go of ego, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And that's to me is a clearer description of what this is about.
I think it's very clear, but as you're talking about it, I hear it's an outgrid kind of an energy. When I think about where does ego live on the change grid?
Ego lives in the outgrid.
Yeah, they're definitely outgrid. And so I can kind of see that the people who are, well, we already know people outside of the red circle in this outgrid danger zone, they're the narcissists. So are narcissists egomaniacs? I don't know the definitions well enough to know if they travel together. or if it's two different things.
But I would also argue, T, that anything outside of the center is based in ego, whether it's
I
a
agree.
lack of ego on the in-grid, whether
All right.
it's a frustrated ego in the upper, the stress area, whether it's the ego of knowing so much downgrid, and whether it's the ego of leading, whatever that means to somebody outgrid. So that's my thought
I
about
like that. No, I like that because that would just mean that while ego can express itself in a variety of different ways, um, that expression becomes more and more pronounced, profound as we
Hmm.
get further and further away. So I guess what I'm just saying or trying to make room for is that someone who's in the outgrid danger zone is going to experience ego and project ego in a different way than someone who's very far downgrid or upgrid or ingrid.
Yeah, but I like what Kathy described because I was watching the Little League baseball series. I'm a sports fanatic, and these are 10, 12-year-old boys. They had one girl, and they had international and domestic teams. What was interesting to me is how the Asian culture teams did not even want their names and numbers on their jerseys. They simply put we greater than I. And that's exactly how they played. So, they cheered each other on when they made mistakes. They, just seemed to be able to recenter themselves. And these are 12-year-old boys, the full expression of emotions and crying when they, the pitcher hit a batter or something like that, and cry when they lose and they have to go home.
Yep.
But this idea of moving from I to we was something that they said they tried to embody in everything they do.
Japan is the most collective culture on earth.
Hmm.
The US is the least collective culture, the most individualistic culture on earth, which is one of the reasons we have such a hard time communicating with the Japanese.
Hmm.
Oh,
They
interesting.
are completely collective. It's all about we. And so that's what you're seeing played out. Now there's also that notion of face. So the Japanese, when they lose, have this sense of face. I've lost face, which is kamikaze. I've lost. It's better to die than to hurt the group,
Hmm.
discredit the group.
Interesting.
There's all of those aspects of collective culture, but that's what you're witnessing and why it's so different than what we do on a team most of the time.
Hmm.
You know what else I'm thinking is, I just remember Moreno talking about never doing psychodrama and doing, role playing with somebody who he didn't use the word center, but if they didn't have a clear sense of self and identity and weren't grounded or centered, that we weren't to do it because they could freak out.
Yeah.
And so it's only when you are centered and have that authenticity, or what Kathy is saying, connected to spirit, that we then can feel free, because we're free of the ego, to be more compassionate, to see things through their eyes, to walk in their shoes. Don't you think? I think this guy's off, and it's just how we're using the word centered, but I do feel there's basically one definition. So
Yeah, well, I agree. I wish it was recenter or something like that.
yeah,
A decenter, that just doesn't, if anything, it makes centered sound bad. Centered,
yeah,
centered is a good word.
Using it means self-centered.
Right.
mhm.
Mm.
I think it was a marketing ploy. It grabs our attention, right?
Well, and I was wondering that because I thought, all right, well, if he's the one who's coined this, does he have a program around it? Does he have a book around it? But if you do a search about him on the internet, you're just going to find his LinkedIn sort of stuff. So, and you can see he's a young man, or at least he looks like he's a young man. So this might be something that he's just getting started in. So I certainly appreciate the I want to say he provoked some thinking in us. And for that, I'm very much appreciative. But like any other time we do this, exercise we call the merging of brilliance, we should be able to say, this is how we could refine the model, and this is what his model has contributed to our understanding of how people operate. And I do like this idea, or at least what I've taken from it, is that every individual has their own sense of center. And I do like that Kathy pointing out that maybe this is an expression of their ego that's in play. So Kathy, correct me if I'm going down the wrong track here, but that we could basically say scattered all over the change grid are all different varieties of ego expression. And depending on where you are on the change grid, your ego may be exhibited and received in very different ways by somebody else because they have their own center. So it's almost like a collision of these, I don't want to say centered, but people, they're off center. Thoughts about that, anybody?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It to me, it reminds me that I call it a from positioning. So I'm always looking for like what's underneath behavior and these egos when they're presenting themselves. Like where are you starting from? What is the value structure underneath it that's driving that? Because we do know something's underneath all behaviors, right? So this idea of a from positioning becomes important, and that's what I think the change grid helps us to understand is this fluid intelligence, because we're working with things that are abstract until we understand the context in which things were shaped.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
maybe what we're talking about when we talk about these different people centers, is that what personality typing really is? When you start describing someone's personality, are you kind of describing this core essential set of attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that create this pattern?
And that's part of it. When you think about the underpinnings of behavior, you have this core pattern. But I remember hearing psychologists say that the best predictor of behavior is past behavior. And that's in part, there's a truth to that, but we also know that behavior and environment are connected, right? So if you take that behavior out of the environment, you might see a shift. And we see this in mammals, animals, right, that are in zoos, but you put them back into the environment and they can once again adapt. And the same thing happens in human behavior.
Right, because if you hang on to something that made sense in the past, but because the environment has changed, no longer works, well, then maybe holding on hard to that belief or behavior, practice, whatever, is now damaging. And I guess the best example of that I can come up with is attitudes about guns, particularly guns that are semi-automatic or automatic weaponry. When the Second Amendment was written, wasn't a musket the weapon of the day? I mean, it took me several minutes to
about
get ready.
environment.
Yeah. I don't think that our founding fathers were visionaries to the point of knowing that somewhere down the road there is going to be weapons that can fire thousands of rounds a minute. That was just not part of it. But because people still hold on tight to that belief or that position, it's creating part of their center, with me, their core. And so if I've got someone who is, an influencer about that is in favor of the expansion of the availability and access to weapons, that's a very different center to operate from than someone who really is more of, let's go down to a thinker, who is really understanding things and coming from that place of strong knowledge, history, logic, that sort of thing,
You just described lobbyists, right?
Well, that's what I was saying. I guess that's where I wanted to get into to this, is that we need to recognize that everyone walking around this planet, that we interact with in any way, shape, or form has their own center. And the likelihood that their center, as they're living it, projecting it, operating from it, is very different than center the way we define center as being. Yeah. So what happens if your nucleus gets too close to my nucleus? What can happen if two nuclei collide?
Conflict.
There could be great conflict. I
Or
mean,
fusion.
a confusion, there could be an explosion, and it could be a really big one. Maybe there are two that operate in harmony with one another. That would be beautiful. But I think that we do need to take this idea that he's put forth and just appreciate that he's really describing different energies that live on the change grid. And I guess what I wanted to just kind of finish off before we're done with our time today is we do talk about life inside the green circle. We do talk about life is lived between the green and the red. So it may very well be that just part of normal life is this off-center center that we're either being pulled towards or we need to recover from to get back to the center. So I guess what I'm saying is that if I am surrounded by leaders and influencers and energizers and advocators that are all trying to get me to move towards their center, what's the likelihood of them succeeding depending on, okay, what dictates the likelihood of them succeeding in moving me to their center?
I think that raises the question of power
Right.
in that environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because the only thing that's really going to save me is me.
Mm-hmm.
And I become more protected from, insulated from whatever it is that's happening consciously, subconsciously, deliberately, accidentally between that green and that red circle. If I am a solid, I have a solid me, I really am centered, that's my best defense against any of the movements that they might be pulling me towards doing.
Mm.
And by the way, what happens if they're in a danger zone?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how, to Tim's word, powerful are they, or how powerful is their energy?
Mm-hmm.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me because I think about that center as being your strong foundation.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
This is humanity. Humanity lives inside of here. It's not perfect. There's a lot of possibilities inside of that green circle, but it's all workable, possible, beneficial, whatever positive word you want to attach to it. That's what our thoughts are around this. As we move between the green and the red circle, we're out there living life. And I mean that literally, we're going to the store and we're dealing with this issue and that issue and whatever. We're being pulled into interactions with other people or other systems or other whatever. And are we going to comply with that? Or are we going to say, wait, is this something that is workable coming from where I'm coming from, or is this price tag too much to pay? Or do I need to go into it ready to defend or at least critically observe what's really going on so I don't get derailed, sucked in, etc.?
And I think we're missing a lot of that in today's time, right?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
losing critical thinking skills, the capacity to actually reflect on things. I often hear people tell me, I don't have time for that. And so they just take whatever information they have. And I remember growing up with some of the Asian cultures, my mentors would always talk about this idea of defending the heart. And we learned this even in martial arts, and talk about a lot of times there's these institutions of perceptions, as he called them, whether it's religious or whatever. But he said any kind of so-called truth out there in the ether or wherever is supposed to be pointing to a truth within. It
Yeah.
should be shining a light within, not saying that I have the truth and it's out here, but it should point to a light within, because then you get to that center that Kathy was just describing. And now you get to choose if you're going to participate in,
Mhm.
this kind of extremism that's out there today. It just seems
Right.
like we're not even thinking about that kind of thing anymore.
And I think the extremes are what always get the attention. Obviously, they're more, there's more tension around them, or there's something more noteworthy. Generally, it's upgrid and outgrid because that's the stories that are being told. But it's living between this green and this red circle, where perhaps me in the center, I discover or I learn from a thinker that there is something that needs more advocacy done. Am
Mm-hmm.
I going to be willing to step out between my green and my red circle and become that advocate? And when I
Mm-hmm.
become that advocate, is it necessary for me to somehow or another expand on my idea of what centered is? Or are there
Right.
certain behaviors and messages that an effective advocator has to adopt or has to operate from? And similarly, a leader, an influencer, an energizer, a helper.
Right.
You got to be willing to embrace what the mantle of whatever each of these roles requires.
Yeah, it's a hero's journey, right? So,
Right. And
yeah.
does that mean that sometimes a hero is willing to step outside of their comfort, their center, the center, if it's really going to be a noble kind of a goal we're looking for, and get out there and be rough and deal with what's dirty and unpleasant and and whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Or do I even have the opportunity to be a hero if I stay inside the green circle?
Only
Um,
as a role model.
yeah.
Yeah, you're a role model, exactly.
Yeah.
But are you
Yeah.
a role model for what the ultimate leader would look like if you're in a situation between the green and the red circle?
Mm,
Mm.
Well,
yes.
maybe if you're a Zen master.
There you go. Right, exactly. Which is going to get us to where I wanted to start our next dialogue around is this idea about the importance of us understanding what we mean by center and how we get to that center involves a very long-term commitment to either a practice, a variety of practices, or a series of practices that all will help us get to the center, but we might change the specific practice. I know I'm babbling a little bit, but how many of you have gone through phases where you're really into meditation, or you're really into journaling, or you're really into this? You don't necessarily have to choose one and do only it for the rest of your life. Am I
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a variety of centering practices. That
Absolutely. And I
you got
think
to
that
find the one that's
center,
right for you, or keep it interesting if you want.
So
right, and that's part of that growth, right? So you evolve it. You,
can you hear me?
Yes, dear, go ahead.
yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I was, okay. I had a call come in, so I had to take it. So I don't, for the last couple minutes. So, but was having a thought about the center and about how the different values of different people could mean a different center.
Yes.
And it all brought me to, it kept popping up in my head that, and I think I've talked about with everybody before, braver angels.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to create a center that no matter what your values are, you can always come together in this center.
Yep. Yep. And again, I think Braver Angels is trying to move people inside of the green circle.
Yes.
Not necessarily directly to the center. Again, I think that's a lifelong pursuit to really be able to live there at will. But I think it's great. No, let's bring people that have got a little bit of a heightened energy in, and or a leader in, and just say, can we all talk together? Find that common ground. Find the mutual respect for one another. Recognize that while there are extremists out there, those extremists don't represent the majority of any group or subgroup. They're extreme. Well, we're the normal range. What's this bell curve look like? Can I have the people in the middle of the bell curve, please? And then those are the people you want to bring together that are more workable and more ready to be open.
Exactly.
Would you say, Linda, that Chan's 6 steps are really the steps of the Braver Angels?
Absolutely. They do weekends. I mean, they do a lot of training classes that people can choose based on what they're trying to do and who they're trying to talk to. But I think the weekends that they do are most profound because they bring together people from all points of view, and then they have things that they do all weekend. And at the beginning, it's like, I mean, it's all very orderly. These people get to say what they believe, and these people get to say what they believe in answers to questions. And you can just see the people fuming as the other side says what they believe. But what they do is exactly what the 6 steps is. And by the end of the Sunday afternoon, people are taking numbers and saying, I've just met a friend I'll have for life. And this is, they're all coming together. And these 6 steps are how they do it.
And see, that
Linda,
to me sounds like it removes or it puts people on the path to remove the ego. That's why I get concerned about these extremes, because that we're seen to not pay attention to. It gets all the attention, but my question is, okay, why is it a surprise that we are here? We're there because we didn't pay attention to how that was a subtle kind of movement in that direction. Right.
And that's the whole point of the Oracle of the Self. It's like you got to start listening a lot sooner, so that you don't get pulled into other people's energies, agendas, etc. Because once you're there, the work to get back to center becomes far, far, far more. What am I say? Demanding, more. Yeah.
what is Braver Angels? I don't know that group. What does it do? Braver Angels?
They started it right after in 2017.
Yeah.
And it's now nationwide, even worldwide. And what they've done is they've put together classes like I have a hard time talking with my relatives, or business, or you name it, and they have a class that you can take, and it's all about those 6 steps in almost all of them. And what their goal is to bring the country together. And it's always small steps, but
Well, and initially, Linda, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but initially it was, after Trump was elected, and then, everyone kind of was either elated or mortified, and these camps started forming, these extremes. And Braver Angels said, wait a second, why can't we just get together and talk? Have courage, be brave enough to just talk about these sorts of things. Find that.
And where they got the name from was, remember the famous speech by President Lincoln?
Gettysburg Address or a different one?
Huh?
Yeah.
Gettysburg Address or a different one?
No, it was during the when he was trying to pull together the country during the Civil War. And the big thing was, we have to tap into our braver angels.
Yeah.
Really?
Interesting. And John Meacham, who is one of my favorite historians,
Yeah, he's good.
has used, and I think he actually has he wrote a book about Lincoln, but he talks about the notion of braver angels, and I think he fed some of that concept. I don't know.
I think the best way to learn about it is just to go to braverangels.com.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know about that.
Also, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Tim chatted over to everybody a link. Have you guys clicked on that link by chance?
Yes.
I would encourage you guys to click on it, and then I don't know what you do on your computer, but on a Mac, we could save it as a PDF or something like that. Yeah, export as PDF. Okay, I'll do it later. But this is a very interesting little article. It is talking about centering and all that, but I love this thought about the difference between centering and grounding. So in essence, the grounding is something we do more for the physical us, as opposed to the spiritual, or more what they say, emotional and spiritual wellness. So Kathy, is this something you've been exposed to, the difference between centering and grounding? You're muted there. Okay, well, I threw that to Kathy. We'll see. She'll pop in a second and tell us. But anybody else, have you heard about this difference between centering and grounding before? Yes, no? Did I lose you all?
Create that space where you are connected to Earth.
Yes.
And there, you're in a much better position to center. So I don't know what you were going to say, Linda, but that's how I approach grounding. It is a different concept, but it is an important piece of centering.
No,
Yeah.
I was just going to correct myself. In President Lincoln's speech, it was he wanted everybody to come together by tapping into their better angels.
Mm.
And they wanted to name it Better Angels, but somebody already had that name, so they actually had to change it to Braver Angels that first year.
Which is better anyway.
I think it is too. I think it is too.
That's a happy accident. That's very good. Yeah, so anyway, I would encourage you guys to go ahead and click on that link and then download the file or bookmark it, whatever you can do, because I think this would be interesting to talk about on Thursday, this difference between centering versus grounding. And then we can get into how they're saying you might detect that you are uncentered. Uncentered, there's another weird word. So, okay. All right. Okay. Any final comments, thoughts for what we've been chatting about today?
This is interesting in terms
Great
of
stuff.
this
Yeah.
grounding. Grounding to me, if you're working the body, you know, the nervous system, that's not disconnected from the body or from the mind, right? So it seems like it's an integrated thing. Like there's not a separation. So I think I struggle with the semantics of the centering versus grounding.
Yeah, well, even this does say that centering is a kind, or grounding is a kind of centering. Yeah, so more concerned with physical elements. One last thing before we're done, Tim, I don't know if you can unmute here, but this comes from Masterclass. Have you done any of these master classes? I see them advertised all the time, but I've never taken one before.
No, I have not. Like you, I've come across them, but I've not taken any of the courses.
Yeah, I mean, this seems really interesting. And
I've done a couple.
Well, I find it just because I wonder, where do they get their instructors from? How many of you might want to say, well, look, I can put together a master class?
Yeah, I've attended one. I think these kinds of platforms, like even what's it called, lead cast or leader cast or something,
Ah,
and they organize within organizations, and they have some of these kind of luminaries come and speak to organizations under the auspices of master classes. So I
yeah,
attend heavy.
right. And it
but
looks like this is an article designed to help you enroll in this. I mean, there's a quiz you can take. So we might even get
right.
to learn something about how they've structured this.
Yeah, most of the times, if you notice online today, master classes, masterminds, all these things are really a way for selling programs. It works. I'm not saying anything in a judgmental way, but oftentimes you're going to get some content and then a pitch for
Yeah,
deeper
like,
immersion.
right. Like Robin wants you to sign up for her class, and she was a Peloton head instructor. Well, this is what I'm kind of wondering. It's like, how do you become this? Starting at $10 per month. Oh, look, you get 50% off only by moving your mouse. Yeah, that's right. Move that mouse, see if you get a discount. All right. Anyway, but I do think it's interesting looking at this. So we'll pick up where we left off next time around. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks, Steve.
remember something if you're not aware of it.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow is the super blue moon. So it will
Yes.
not happen again for, I believe, 14
Yeah,
years.
2037.
Yeah, so just kind of know that it's the time of a blue moon. There's a couple of definitions, but most commonly it's whenever there's a month that has got two full moons in it. This month happens to have that. But it's also coincidentally, the moon is closest to the Earth as of tomorrow. And so
Wow.
it's very large, 7%
just-
larger than normal. But it's not blue. If you're going out there looking for a color, it's not blue.
And just up to the northeast of that will be Saturn.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right. That's what it's saying. Is like Saturn should be visible with the unassisted eye up and to the right of the moon itself.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that whole phrase, once in a blue moon, well, that's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow.
They don't occur very often. Usually there's going to be a regular blue moon every couple of years, something like that. But a super blue moon, that's a very rare occurrence. So,
Interesting.
yep. So we're throwing a little party here. We're going to serve blue moon martinis.
Fun.
We're going to, I said, we're going to serve blue food. Do you have any idea how that there's like no really blue food? So think about it, there's no blue food there. I mean,
Blueberries.
but they're
Yeah.
purple. And really, if you peel one, it's green.
Mm.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, it's tough.
Are we all invited, Chief?
Well, of course, Robel, it's at 7:30. Wear something blue or something you only wear once in a blue moon.
Interesting.
And there will be a quiz, just so you know.
You know, T, you keep saying you're an introvert. You have more parties than any extrovert. I
Yeah, well,
know.
it's really weird. I love throwing parties because Linda is a very social person.
She's fun.
And anything that I can do to help her have a gathering and that, you know, I do like entertaining, but it does exhaust me. So, but I'm really more into the mechanics of the entertaining than I am in the event itself. In fact, Shags might feel similar about that. Shags is really, you know, has a reputation for the world's best paella. And so he'll throw these giant paella parties, and
I need
you know,
20
people
people.
hire him to do it, you know. But are you more into the party, Shags? Or are you more into the whole process of making this
both.
amazing dish?
Both.
Yeah, well, the difference for me is that I will literally rope off the kitchen. So it's like, you're coming over to this house for dinner, stay out of the kitchen. I'm
Well, the
busy.
paella is done outside, so that's
Well, that's
more of a
true.
show.
Yeah, it's more of a show. All righty. Okay, anyway, thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
You.
Bye
now.
now. Everyone.
Bye-bye. Cheers.